content today is going to be our discussion and our chat with Melissa. So let me just set a bit of context. Many of you who are here in the room today have been to previous sessions, so that's great. You will have heard this before, but I just want to welcome everyone today for, I think we're session 5. So we're kind of halfway through the series of the exploring the journey as a female founder from founder to leader. And as usual, I will be having a fireside chat with our guest today, Melissa, and I will introduce Melissa in a moment. And do feel free to ask questions. We want it to be interactive today, and we will aim to be finishing by 1/4 the hour with a little bit of an update from me about next steps and next week's guest. So this is all about the founder to leader journey, but as we say every week, this looks a linear journey. In reality, it isn't. It's iterative. But what happens is wherever and however you traverse this journey, you are learning and you are developing your leadership skills. You are learning to become more deeper in your leadership skills and abilities as you develop your business. As your business grows, you grow with it. Now, whether you start thinking about the legacy of your business right at the beginning, and many people do, and we certainly recommend that people start with being absolutely clear about what their why is, what the purpose of the business is, to thinking about that, how that develops. Now, last week, those of you who were here who watched the recap will have heard Kelly talk about how when she started her business with her business partner, it was a case of, well, we will focus on any work that comes our way, a kind of reactive response to starting their business. They were doing what they loved doing in their brand agency, but it wasn't until they were down the journey away that it became clear to them who their niche was, who their ideal clients was, and that developed. And as you will have heard from Kelly, she then sold the business and has started another business. And I know what we'll hear from Melissa today is about a number of iterations that she's had in her journey and a number of different businesses that she's kicked off and started and currently working on. So let me just introduce Melissa to you. And really, I'm just going to outline her bio, but then we're going to dive in and unpack that a bit. So really, Melissa has been passionate about using technology and entertainment to accelerate health equity. As you will hear, as Melissa talks to us, that while she's based in North America at the moment, she's worked across a number of continents, doing multicultural programming to global audiences. And I want to hear more about Breakthrough and what that's involved, the empathy-focused, empathy-driven technology that she's been developing, and how she's developed expertise in building virtual-centric communities and leveraging entertainment as a vehicle for education. So that's the words. They just sit there on paper, but what's more interesting is to hear from Melissa herself as she can help us to unpack that bio and say a bit more about what you do. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. So happy to be here and happy to be able to be in conversation with everyone today. Founder conversations are my favorite.
Yeah. So shall we start with, as I say, sort of unpacking some of the things that are there in your bio, and can you explain a bit more, particularly about the empathy-driven technology that you've been pioneering and the work and how you're encapsulating that in your business?
Yeah. So Breakthrough is 2 years old and really sort of coming into our momentum, I'd say maybe Q2, Q3, Q4 of this year. But essentially, when I define empathy driven, it can fall under the 5 pillars of human flourishing. This is a framework. I didn't invent it. The originator was a very visionary psychiatrist named Dr. Martin Seligman, who came up with a flourishing framework. And then Harvard's public health school has since sort of adapted it. And there are 5 pillars within human flourishing. It's physical and mental health, it's close social relationships, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, which basically means resilience, the fortitude to keep going, and life and happiness satisfaction. And if you sort of couple all those 5 things together, it's the formula for living a thriving life. There's data that says, at least in North America, only about 5% of the population is optimally well, as in they don't have negative aches and pains. They have a sense of purpose and fulfillment. They have a few friends they can call on that feel deep and richly fulfilling. And they have a sense of joy and contentment about their life. So, and they have immense resiliency, right? Like that's literally what it means to be well, to have a regulated nervous system, all of that. So when I think of what we can build out of Breakthrough, it's really, we can build any sort of product that's aligned with that. So our first digital product comes out of an experience we started with way back when. I think that's actually how I met Christina in the sort of first iterative process of this. But essentially, we were looking at the group therapy, group coaching model. And I thought, peer-to-peer experiences are almost, I mean, you could say that they go back to our early days, right? Like before we had clinicians and therapists and all this, where did we go? We went amongst our collective to seek healing, to get past adversity. So I said, how do we take this model, but optimize it for today? We have a number of people that can't get the services they need or are shy to deal with other human beings or whatever it might be. So we built AI well-being coaches. I brought in cognitive behavioral therapists, somatic therapists, so that they could be trauma-informed, both mind, body sort of thing. They developed the data sets that we trained our AI. And then those AI can take cohorts of folks through exercises and challenges. And it's all text-based. So it can reach low resource communities. It's really simple to use and it's a lot of fun. We have like really high engagement. We have some really exciting health outcomes that are coming out of that. So that's just like one example of a product that we're currently in market with that we sell to clinics and B2B organizations. And there's some other things that we've got developing in the pipeline, but that gives you a sense. We're sort of looking at, how do we reach people where they are to help them attain that higher way of living, that better way of living, just to kind of flourish and expand.
So that the model is, as you say, B2B, it kind of be white labeled, so your clients can adjust it, whether it's a clinic, they can develop it, tailor it to that particular market. Great.
You
Great.
got it. Exactly. And we sell it as an engagement tool. It's an engagement, it's education adherence and it's medication adherence tool. That's kind of how we're able to push it out there. But essentially, it's like a way for people to have text-based psychosocial support groups.
Yeah. I've been a fan of Martin Seligman for a number of years, so from the days of learned optimism right the way through.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
yeah,
You got it. How do
very
we
powerful. Yeah.
how do we toughen up to
Yeah.
get life, but also honor what has happened to us?
So this is clearly very AI driven. Prior to the AI technology coming in the last 2 years of starting that business, what were you involved in before then?
Okay. So I mean it's been a non-linear path, I'd say. So I had a business, my first startup was in the luxury market. And that was sort of, you could think, so even before that, my work has always been in entertainment. So I started my career as a journalist and lived around the world doing that. You know, and then I ended up in Hollywood, and I worked for different showrunners and things like that, but then ended up kind of solidly in John Legend's camp. You know, there's different camps in Hollywood. And not on his music side, but on his film and TV side. So we produced La La Land and a host of other things, and a lot of that creative development. But the beautiful thing about John and the team I was working with, we were really small, maybe about 4 of us within that production company. But we really cared about merging entertainment and education with a multicultural lens, right? And that was a place I feel like I was really able to cultivate a very specific worldview, but also ethos around how you can make things fun and interesting, but and engage the attention economy with that. How do you kind of propel people to live better lives? That's something that John was very passionate about too. But I could see the writing on the wall, and I could see that, you know, technology and especially AI, I'd always been keeping track of these things. And I was like, it's going to eat everything. And if you're not sort of privy to where the curve is going, you can easily be left behind. And I think that's a lot of the conversations we have when folks are striking, and there's a lot of fear around, you know, a changing marketplace. It's like, can we still compete with these technologies? And I sort of thought about it in terms of, well, how can I stand in the bridge? How do I stand the gap? And so my first business was way more, still incorporated AI in some ways, but it was way more LA centric. It was, you know, trying to connect folks to get luxury rentals. And then after that business, I thought about, well, actually, what do I really deeply care about?
Right.
And I, you know, the fashion side of things, like it sounds like a very sexy business, but ultimately it was like all operational, which is not my strong suit. And so business teaches you what you're good at and what you're not good at, right? You come face to face with that. But this next business, I really sort of dug deep. And the first iteration was more professional development for women, but found that it was hard to scale that market. And we can talk about the learnings in there. Found it was really actually quite difficult. And so kind of came back to like, what is the core? Like, what's my motivation? What am I here to do? And then that became the launching pad for what we're building now.
Yeah. It always comes back, doesn't it, to the motivation and what your why is. Why, you know, what's the, we talk a lot about the purpose-driven businesses now. It becomes a bit of a cliche, but on an emotional level and a personal level, the difference it makes once you are clear about what it is you want to do, what you're passionate about, then everything else tends to follow, doesn't it, in terms of the development of the business too.
I think also, so one, I think that for women in particular, I think impact, and that this isn't every woman, and I don't even think it doesn't need to be. We don't need to carry this sense that it has to be purpose driven. I'm like, if you want to create a widget and you just want to make a lot of money, go get them. But I think for a lot of women, we tend to be socialized to be more nurturing and more impact driven. And so it just resonates. And when you think of just how hard business can be, whether it's like the plateau of death of trying to get to product market fit, which can take you 3 years, right? And so it's like, where do you get the runway to be able to get to that place? That's really difficult. So a why helps you get through that. And then once you do have product market fit and you get into that momentum, and now you're on the other side where things are going so quickly, and that's beautiful and that's growth, but at the same time, hard, the learning curve, your stretching of self, a why is really helpful in being able to get back to like, why do we wake up every day to do this?
Exactly. But as you say, we've talked about on previous sessions, in order to get to the stage where you, as you say, have identified that fit and identified that why, you know, you've got to sort of just churn out the work and get the clients, to get the money in, to get to a stage where you can actually get more people to join you on your team, and you can expand your team. At the beginning, you've got to do it all, and that's tough. And then it is really hard to turn work away when you need that financial resource to move forward. So what would you say are some of the lessons about scaling that you've found, and advice that you'd give other founders?
Mm. Well, one, I'd say that as women founders, there's not going to be a right or wrong way to do it. So, like, if you are reading some blog of some tech bro who is telling you how to scale and this is how you do it, and you schedule this many meetings with these many investors and you do it like this, I mean, maybe that works for you, but the data shows it probably won't. And so I think that there's no wrong way. If you start with a service business and then transition, and then you've got income coming in that can pay for a prototype if you want to build a technology company, beautiful. If you are, and I say this quite candidly, if you gotta like speak nicely to your spouse to give you some seed capital and that's how you start, go at it. If you've got to, if you've got to work two jobs to get there, go at it. Because once you've found that sort of click, you found a really big market, and folks that want to pay for what you do, right? Like there's just an alignment, then go forth, sell like crazy. But until you have that, it's the amount of, you don't always know the amount of time it's going to take to be able to develop the thing. You don't always know how much it's going to cost you. And you also don't know how much it's going to ask of you to be flexible and adaptable enough to be honest with yourself when the data is not showing you that there's a viable path forward, and to be iterative and pliable enough to change. And you need some space. You need some space to be able to do that. You need some creativity to do that. And so often the data shows that as women, we tend to start businesses because a calamity has hit us. It's hard to be able to work and take care of our children if we're sole breadwinners, or we're not able to split costs in a certain way. So we start businesses. Typically, it's from a hard time, which means that there can be a lot of that pressure, an immense amount of pressure and stress around what the business can be. So we don't always feel like we can have very expanded ideas or really vision out what the next 10 years of the business could be. So I would say that whatever you need to do to give yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room to be able to really think through like the bigness, beauty, and creativity, like what does that look like 10x? That's the big thing. And however you do that, like there is no wrong path. Don't let anybody make you feel bad about figuring out how to get yourself some space.
Did you work to a kind of blueprint? Did you have a kind of 3-year plan that you mapped out and worked towards, or was it evolving for you, Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, in order to raise, you need to have some sort of thing to show. And I'll say that for me, every time that I've gone to a pitch, I like it's sometimes it's like drill sergeant energy, right? I don't always pattern match what these investors are used to. So there's a bit more rigor in terms of how they interrogate me. So that there does have to be a plan. I create projections, I have spreadsheets for what my hires are going to be over, quarters and things like that. So there's definitely that, but I will tell you that a lot of what is written is not at all what actually ends up happening. So it's good to have your plan in place and to think through where it begins. But, if you pivot, you're sort of starting all over again, right? New market, new language, new gatekeepers, new ways of selling, all of that.
Oh, and what has the actual pitching situation been like for you? What's your experience of going for rounds of funding and having to pitch? And in terms of the investors that you were pitching to, were they largely a male audience of investors, or what's the balance been like of gender in pitching for funding for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've pitched both for sure. I think, again, never limit yourself to what is possible. You might think that, oh, I'm building empathy-driven technology. Maybe this female fund is going to get it, but that female fund, may not. But you're speaking to this old Indian man who had a heart scare 2 years ago. And when you talk about optimal well-being, you're speaking his language. He really understands what this means. And the product touches him on a deeper level. But there's no other basis of you thinking that this person is going to get what you're doing or what you're selling to. So I think that I've had to, and it's an ongoing thing. Some people are savants at raising. I am not. It's very tricky. But I would say that ultimately, if what the problem you're solving is so big and so obvious, and you can show some traction that, there are some data points to show that this is a real market, then, it's viable for a conversation. One of the things that has really helped me is the building of relationships. So coming back to, Elaine, when you and I sort of first spoke about having a conversation with each other, I told you that one of the core things that I wish we were told as immigrant women, told as women of color, told as women of any color, whatever, we're often told so much about how the world is out to get us, how we're like, the data just bangs us on the head. Like, we don't get access to capital. We don't get this. We don't get this. And within that, we feel very compelled to say, okay, so I have to code switch, or I have to do a number of things to fit in. And ultimately, like, when you look at the icons out there that we love and admire, they are deeply authentically themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So when we come back to the fundraising conversation, one of the issues I faced is, well, initially I'm trying so hard to be something that they can respect, but what is that thing, right? What is that thing I'm trying to like emulate myself into? And as I sort of got deeper and felt far more comfortable with who I am, what I represent, the complexities of my identity, I was able to show up in rooms not only with presence, but a sense of fortitude, right? But I also was able to look very clearly at, like, what am I good at and what am I not good at, right? I get like deeply passionate when I speak, and sometimes that scares CPAs. So I'm like, okay. Instead of always trying to come to you and pitch in your glass office, like, can I create things in my sphere? Because I throw amazing elaborate dinner parties, and I'm great at doing partnerships, right? I'm good at building community. So why not invite them to my space? Come see me in my power, and then decide if you want to play, now that you get to see what it looks like. Because if I'm sitting in front of you in a suit trying to talk to you about my KPIs and I fumble on a word, maybe you don't give me the benefit of the doubt. But when you see that I'm able to galvanize and how I'm seen in my community and how that's a competitive advantage, it changes the direction. And so I started throwing parties, and I would invite angel investors, and then I would get checks. I started doing partnerships. I just recently had I had JP Morgan host us a dinner, and invited a number of big investors. Things turned. Suddenly, folks who hadn't been responding to my emails are like, let's get that lunch on the book. Let's gear up. So I take your answer, and then I take your question and I go way further along with it.
Hoped you would be doing, Melissa, because I remember when we talked, you used the term about being audacious, and I loved that.
Yeah.
You described just that authenticity,
Yeah.
as being audacious. I mean, it shouldn't be audacious. It should just be about being authentic. But I wonder, if you've got any tips. Let's begin to open up the conversation now. So do feel free to drop a question in the chat or unmute yourself and come in and chat with Melissa too. But I wonder how we worked with as a female founder. How do we develop that bravery to actually be authentic when there may be a lot of pressures around, this is the mold that you need to fit in order to raise money, or this is the mold that you need to fit in order to make those collections? How do we become more authentic? How do we become braver in our identity?
Yeah. So there's different frameworks you can look, there's Brene Brown, she talks about vulnerability and bravery. There's different things out there. With where we are with breakthrough, I'm a big proponent of using the power of the body, right? Our bodies are, if we're a female founder, we're probably going to be very high up here. Like that cerebral is just going. Right? We are like highly, all up here, high stress, high anxiety, all the high achieving, all the things. But the body, the somatic experience of the body is so powerful. And it is a tool that no one can take away. And so I'm a big proponent of doing different types of breath work exercises, regulating your nervous system so you're not being driven by your stress, by your anxiety, by your fear, right? Clarity of mind. I'm a big proponent of different forms of Eastern exercises like yoga and things like that, Tai Chi, so that you can get that clarity of mind, meditation exercises. But then another big one. So I'll give you an example of something that I do. So literally, if I receive, I'm now in a place where in a day, if let's say I receive like one rejection, that's not going to phase me. Two rejections, not going to phase me. Three rejections, not going to phase me, but it will start. There'll be a little chip. Fourth rejection, you're getting a totally different Melissa, right? So I now understand like what are my boundaries to when I get swayed? What happens when it feels a little disorienting? And I go straight to the gym. And when I feel like the world is closing in, it could just be 5-10 minutes on the treadmill, but I sit in it. I really conjure all the fears. I feel it. And as I move my body, what I'm doing is I'm training my brain to realize even when I'm having the most nasty thoughts, we keep moving. We don't shut down. We don't slow down. We don't freeze. We keep going. And so through that sort of stamina building, right, I'm able to now when something hits me, my first reaction is not freeze or there's what fight, flight, or freeze. None of those, right? Like we stay on it. We stay on it. And I think that that's something that as women, we're not told that we can have a warrior mentality. We can have a queen mentality. We can have all these different archetypes that we play with to our disposal to help us continue going.
Yeah, and I know that on previous sessions we've talked about the importance of self-awareness, and one of the ways to get that awareness is to be able on a regular basis to switch back into that reflection mode, whether it's at the end of every meeting or every interaction, certainly at the end of the day. How have I been turning up in this meeting? How have I been turning up in this day? What have I learned from that? What's been comfortable, what's not been comfortable, and actually doing that, because unless we take the time to self-reflect, we're not going to develop that awareness.
And things go so quickly and things can be so stressful, which is why I come back to like one of the big things for me has been like increasing my capacity, increasing my stamina, emotional, physical, all of those things to be able to build something big, And again, we're so inundated with stories of how stressful it is and how hard it is. We're not necessarily focused on the leader you can become to withstand all of that, not just bear it, but actually play with it, enjoy it, build with a sense of, audacity, and be
Yeah,
quite, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just bearing things. That phrase is just makes me want to cringe, really. That's not the situation we want to be in. So
Yeah.
let's see what questions that people have. If you want to unmute yourself and just raise a question or comment on anything that Melissa's said so far.
Or share your own stories.
Absolutely. Ah, Christina.
Hello. Thank you so much, Melissa. I mean, Melissa knows that I'm a really big fan of hers ever since we connected about a year and a half ago and I was introduced to your body of work. And obviously, I know your story, which I find so inspiring. So, one thing I want to do is just plug your Idealist podcast, which I know you're not producing any new episodes of, but it is hands down one of my favorite podcasts of all times because you are interviewing visionary women around the world, most of whom are female founders. So I just found so much wisdom in listening to those episodes, Melissa. And I just love to hear from you. What are some of the sort of key learnings that you found after interviewing all of these different women?
Love that. Thank you for plugging that. You all can go to the idealistpodcast.co. And yes, I spoke to founders, poets, astronauts, women who just have done amazing things. And the core thing comes down to there's no one way. There's no one way. And that is a lie that we're sold, that it has to look a certain way. You have to raise a certain way. You have to, look, there's not one way to do this. There's not one background to do this. You could have been a housewife for 20 years, decide you want to run a business because you make beautiful floral arrangements for your families and create something visionary over the next 5 years of your life, right? So similarly, you could have been a founder all your life, switch to being a writer and write prolific works. And so there's no one way to make a life, to make a business. But if you infuse it with the things, look at that Ikigai Japanese philosophy model of, what are you good at? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? Then you can model something out. What I'm curious, what are some of the things you took away that you're like, that stayed with me?
Yeah, definitely stories of resilience. Women who had this vision and that worked towards that vision with such passion and determination, overcame some tremendous obstacles, but really never gave up. They never, stopped believing in that vision. They just continued to stay focused, and kind of like what you said about getting on the treadmill, right? They train their minds to know that even after the fourth, fifth, 10th rejection, like they're still moving forward. They're still believing in their vision. They're still believing that someone out there will share that vision, and want to invest in them or want to buy their product or service or whatever that is. And I also, want to come back to what you said about like there is no one way. And I loved hearing from women on different parts of the world, ways of life, who are just bringing their authentic selves into the world and showing up as they truly are. So what you said a little while ago about being authentic and not code switching, not trying to make yourself into someone you're not, I feel is just such a powerful message for us women to really internalize, right, and believe in. Thank you.
And what I'll say is the caveat is like, if you're not super good at something, code switching can be good for you. It's okay if you do that, in a certain sector of your career. That's the other thing. Like when we say there's no right way, like also, right? I say authenticity because it's been earned, right? There's like the tremendous force that comes through having figured out who you are to then be able to show up in the world. But as you're figuring that out, try some stuff. And Christina, when you're speaking, I attended this conference and I met a woman, and this is how you could see the two different sort of takes on business. And I was so fascinated by it. One woman was talking about a business that she had started, and it was about she had sunset it and closed it. And when asked why, she said, well, I'd created a logo, and then I think it was like Red Cross wrote me a letter to say that, it was too similar to theirs and they would sue me. And I was like, I can't deal with the legal costs of this. I'm going to shut it down. And the person next to her said, well, you could have gone to the Red Cross and asked them to buy you. Or you could have asked them to partner. And I said, yeah, that's it. That's, the different, like you can keep going. You can figure it out. You can deal with really hard things that seem insurmountable. But sometimes you also just need the permission to know. And by listening to lots of stories, you get to be like, oh, wow, okay. Like, it's not just me. Like, this is a thing and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you were saying about as we develop that authenticity, you can take that authenticity into whatever business situation that you develop, the new things, because the core remains the same. If the core is you and you're very clear about who you are, you can develop and flex, pivot, or flex or move in a different direction with that kind of legitimate confidence that you've got the strength there.
Yeah. But resilience is a big thing. It's a big, and we're strong. We can do it.
Anything else anybody wants to comment on or question for Melissa? A couple of questions coming through. What are some ways to get super regulated and prepare for a public facing role?
Okay. Can you say more as to what you mean by super regulated?
AA, can you add a bit more to that?
And if you can tell me a little bit about what the public facing role is and what your maybe fears are around it, so we can provide some specific. Okay, not be in the free state and fear of success. So actually, I'm going to actually ask Christina if she wants to contribute, because Christina is an amazing coach herself as well. Christina, how would you respond to that to help someone not be in a free state?
Well, in fact, you alluded to this a few minutes ago, which is those mental fitness exercises. So what I always try to work with my clients on is finding ways to ground yourself before you go into those situations. And again, everybody's going to be different. Some people really like the physical work, right? Whether it's connecting with your breath or grounding your feet into the floor. Perhaps it's, having done a workout beforehand and obviously clean yourself up a bit before you get into that public facing role. But sometimes just burning off some of that adrenaline helps you kind of calm yourself and be in that space. Envisioning with your mind. So those are the mental exercises of just picturing yourself in that public facing position, really envisioning all the details of the situation that you're in. And again, just envisioning yourself speaking, owning your space, really commanding the room, a successful outcome, whatever it is you're working towards. So those are some of the just real easy, basic tips that I like to work on my clients with when they're looking to regulate themselves and prepare themselves for those big meetings or public facing events.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah. That's super helpful.
Great. Okay, it looks like we've lost a couple of people as we draw to the close. So in the last few minutes then, I'd like to really thank you, Melissa, for giving us your time today. We have been recording this. we will actually move it across onto the recording onto our online community so people can review it and see it there. We'll also add in links to your podcast, and if there's anything else, in any other links that you have that we can share on our online community, Melissa, just drop us a line or add some links in the chat. And I've met a number of people for one-to-one sessions, but I'd just like to offer that, and Ikutu's put the link to my Calendly in the chat as well. If somebody wants to book a one-to-one with me, perhaps we can pick up on some of the things that have been discussed today or on previous sessions. I'm very happy to speak to people about what they're getting from these sessions that we've been having over the last few weeks, and look forward to the next couple of sessions. The next week's session, we've actually got a guest speaker who does a lot of work with women in the area of the menopause, because I don't know if it's true in the States, but in the UK, October is menopause month. And we're having Fiona speak to us about sort of the implications of menopause on us as women founders, or, you know, in any work situation that we're in. That's next Wednesday. And on Friday is the National Menopause Day. So we're kind of sort of framing the topic, and our social media and blogs, etc., in the coming week will be focusing on the issues facing us as women with menopause, specifically from the lens of the female founder. So we've got another question that AA has just popped in, Melissa, just before we finish, are there any books that you, or a particular book that helped you on your journey, or anything that you'd like to share?
Yes, and for some reason I am blanking.
Well, I can certainly recommend Martin Seligman, and you can certainly find a number of publications that he's done there. You mentioned Brené Brown, definitely, and fortunately a lot of these people are there on YouTube or TEDx talks and TED Talks for people to see. So I'm sure we've got a great resource. And Melissa, thanks for putting Flourish in by Martin Seligman. We can add resources in our community chat, and we will certainly make a note of what's coming through in this chat here, but do feel free to add any more recommendations, all of us, on the community platform.
Yeah, 100%. I put also The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. That's for focusing on the body. If you struggle with these free states and you're looking to understand both the biology, the neuroscience, and then some of the cutting edge science around how to help some of that on the mental health side. But then on the business side, I highly recommend 10X is better than 2X. It's been really wonderful for me in terms of thinking through how to vision bigger.
Yes, yes. Let's not be limited in our thinking of what's possible. Yeah. So many thanks again, Melissa. It's been really great to have you here. And thank you, Christina, for suggesting Melissa as a guest. And yeah, I look forward to continuing dialogue with you. And thank you to everyone who's been here in the room today. And thank you to those who will be catching up on the catch-up version of today's talk. So thanks, everyone, and hopefully see you all back here next week.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.